This episode of Reality Escape Pod is brought to you by Weldwood Marketing, Buzzshot, Cogs by Clockwork Dog, and Patreon supporters like you.
Cogs by Clockwork Dog is an easy-to-use software-hardware platform for running interactive events, including escape rooms, haunts, and other immersive experiences. Their plug-and-play hardware seamlessly integrates with their software, so you can create a game with any type of puzzle logic, lighting, and sound cues without having to write a single line of code.
Cogs has an outstanding support system dedicated to getting your show up and running and keeping it that way. Their team is ready to answer your questions via email or over their Discord server. On their website, you can watch tutorials, explore the knowledge base, or join that very Discord, which is such a valuable resource because it boasts a community of over 400 users who are continuously experimenting with Cogs, figuring out how to push its limits, and help grow that ecosystem. It's a fantastic place to get support. Ask a how do you do that, receive news and updates, share tips and tricks, and connect with other escape room users about building games. Join the community today with the invite link at cogs.show. When you have a community behind you, you're never going at it alone.
Get the Cogs starter set for only $130 with free shipping to the USA. This bundle is normally valued at $257. You can learn more and purchase your starter set at cogs.show. Use code REPOD at checkout. That's REPOD. Make sure to follow them on Instagram or Facebook at Cogs app for the latest news. Link and details in the show notes.
Welcome to the Reality Escape Pod, your lifeline when you need a getaway from the real world. I'm David Spira, alongside my co-host, PG Law. Together, we're exploring immersive gaming from all angles, and we'll be joined by guests who really know their stuff. Today's guest is physicist Professor Paul Kwiat. Specializing in quantum physics, he holds a PhD in physics from the University of California, Berkeley. In 2001, he began teaching at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. In addition to his teaching and research work, he also has co-created LabEscape, a science education escape room designed to impart lessons in quantum computing on anyone who plays, regardless of their educational background. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, very nice to be here. Thank you.
So last month, we were running our escape room tour, Escape, Immerse, Explore, Time and Space in Chicago and Champaign-Urbana. About halfway through the first session, some of our guests began telling me that I had to go play LabEscape and meet you. And then, by further happenstance, you happened to be heading to Los Angeles to bring LabEscape to a conference. And then PG was able to play. I'm so glad that we have the chance to talk more and I get to learn more about all of the things you're working on, because I found LabEscape and your work incredibly fascinating.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you had the opportunity to come. We've never had a escape room tour group come through before, so that was quite the experience for us. And I was quite curious to see how it was going to go in comparison. Obviously, there's a whole range of different escape rooms with emphasis on different sorts of things, and we're certainly not going to win any awards for set design, things like that, but it's also not really our goal. So I was happy to see that it gave at least a couple thumbs in the upward direction from you folks.
People were certainly talking about it.
David just sent me to this thing. He said, go play LabEscapes. And I was like, what is this? And he was like, I think you might find it interesting. And if you like it, then maybe we can have him on as a guest. And I went and played and I came back and I said, let's have him on. We didn't even have to have a discussion about it.
Awesome.
So the plan for this interview is to start with questions that will feel incredibly familiar to our listeners. And as we go, shift deeper and deeper into your area of expertise, building up along the way.
Let's explore the origins of LabEscape. How did escape rooms end up on your radar?
Well, I guess like most people, they ended up by actually going and doing one. I was at a physics conference in Switzerland back in 2015 in the summer, and I was looking for something fun to do. And TripAdvisor said the number one fun thing to do in Lausanne, Switzerland was this escape room. And to be honest, I wasn't going to do it. My partner and I were both there. It was a beautiful sunny day. We were right by Lake Geneva and it was gorgeous out. And we're going to pay someone to lock us up in a room for an hour. But it was the number one thing that was listed. And it had like 80 reviews and they were all 5-star. And I've never seen anything that had a perfect rating before. It's the first time I'd ever seen that. I thought, okay, well, we have to try this. We were absolutely unsuccessful in our attempt to thwart Moriarty. Nevertheless, I definitely had a good time, felt that it was obviously very immersive, and thought that we could do an interesting one that would be both science themed in terms of the storyline, could be a legitimate story that wouldn't be very far from what we're trying to pursue in actual research at the moment, and also would be an opportunity for me to introduce a lot of the demonstrations that I often do when I'm lecturing. So I often lecture classes with several hundred people in the class for electricity and magnetism or thermodynamics or quantum mechanics or something like that. And there's just a lot of demos that are just really neat to look at that most people never get to see because most people are not in a college physics class. And so this would be a way I thought that I could just have exposure to some of those things for the people. I would say that the original goals, I had 3 of them. One is to show that science can be both relevant and accessible to people. So I wanted to be able to explain, for example, the 3D movies. When you go to an IMAX movie, how does that actually work? Which doesn't require any equations whatsoever. I think people often think you need to have a bunch of math in order to understand science in any way. And that is just not a true statement. It might be that you need to use a bunch of math if you're going to do some precise calculation about something. And that's fine. You need to have people who can do that. But I think a lot of the relevance for people is not that. Okay, so that's the first goal, is relevant and accessible. The second goal is to show that it can be aesthetically beautiful, because some of the visual effects that we have, optical effects in particular, are just really nice to look at. And then the third is that it can be fun. And I think most people don't associate fun and science in the same word unless there's a not somewhere in that sentence. But in reality, I think lots of people like to solve puzzles and like to solve problems and like the joy of that, of understanding things and figuring things out, the joy of figuring things out. Kids love to do that all the time. Kids are always asking, why is this and why is that, and trying to figure things out. And I sometimes think we get a little of that beaten out of us as we grow up. And so showing people that, no, this is what scientists do. We just are playing around with stuff all the time, trying to figure things out.
You've touched on it a little bit, but why don't we describe LabEscape and what makes it different from a regular escape room?
So I describe this as at the moment, quantum themed, because the storyline is all based on quantum-y types of stuff. In particular, the kind of new revolution with quantum communication and quantum computation, quantum sensing. The whole storyline is revolving around the trials and tribulations of one Professor Alberta Pauline Schrödinger, who is the protagonist in all of the missions. We've had 4 sort of independent missions to date. And so these are all things that she has to deal with. And I think the specifics are not all that important. It's kind of the prequel, which is the earliest in time, which is how did she get her funding to begin with? She has to submit a grant proposal and she can't remember the password to her computer and just trying to figure that out. And so the thing that makes it a little bit unique is that I would also say that it is the first science-based escape room, as far as I know. I've encountered other ones that have come up maybe since then, but I think we were the first people to start doing this.
When did you start doing this?
In 2017, we had our grand opening. In the January of 2016, there was a call from the American Physical Society for doing outreach, and I submitted a proposal to that, and they gave me a little bit of money that got us started. Around Thanksgiving 2016 is when we started doing a bunch of beta testing. That's when we opened first. So I claim this as a science-based escape room. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that the puzzles, most of them are based on different science phenomena, mostly physics phenomena, because I'm a physicist. And really physics underlies almost everything anyway. And so sometimes chemists would claim some of the things that we do, but I'm still going to claim that they're physics.
Stand your ground, Paul.
I feel like there's an XKCD that kind of makes fun of the fact that all of the different sciences ultimately boil down to physics.
Absolutely. And so let me think if I can come up with an example that we have retired. So we had one that was based on, there's this paper that you can get, it's liquid crystal paper, and when you heat it up, it changes color. You're familiar with this, for example, mood rings do the same sort of thing. When you change the temperature, then they change color.
It's not mood-based, Paul? My worldview is shattered. Sorry.
Indeed. Correct. Not mood-based. Anyway, based on interesting physics that we could talk about another time, there's other more interesting physics to talk about. Anyway, so the puzzle itself was that paper was on a block of aluminum. And if that were all that was to it, when you put your hand on the paper or put some other heating source on the paper, it would just change color, and that wouldn't necessarily tell you much. But the aluminum itself had engraved on it some symbol or a series of symbols. And then that was filled with epoxy, and then everything was sanded smooth. And now when you heat it, because the metal has a much higher thermal conductivity than the epoxy, you end up, when you then look at the piece of paper, the metal looks very cold compared to the epoxy, which stays warm from whatever heat source you used. So you're able to reveal this puzzle in a pretty unique way. And anyway, that's an example of a science-based puzzle. And one of the things that we always do before we go into a mission is we have a briefing, as you guys have actually experienced, where we show a couple demos of physical phenomena like how 3D glasses work, or infrared cameras, or whatever is going to be relevant. And then those hopefully are going to be relevant to something you might encounter in the room, maybe not obviously so, but it will be. And then afterward, we always do a debrief. And in the debrief, of course, we answer any questions people have about what was the right way to solve this puzzle or what was going on with X, Y, or Z. And then usually I'll try to make a connection and try to give some explanation of what's going on science-wise behind each of the puzzles, how they're working, and why you should care. And why, for example, you might care with the color-changing liquid crystal display. That is, in fact, they used to have these batteries where you could tell how much battery life was left in your battery, where you would press the ends, and there would be this little color display that would run along the thing.
I remember those.
The way that works, it's the same kind of liquid crystal material, and you run a current through it, and it heats it up. And depending on how much current you have, it heats it up a different amount, and then different colors appear. So that's one example. Also, sometimes there are these forehead thermometers where you push it on your forehead and they'll tell you what the temperature is. So that's also how those work. So always try to make some connection back to things that people actually have in their daily lives. If you just show something cool, sciencey, but it's not connected to anything, for the most part, then it's gone. It's like cotton candy. You eat it, but then a little while later, there's just nothing and you can't remember it. Okay, so that's what I mean by science-based. And then just the other part of the debrief that we always do now, we didn't necessarily start out that way, but now that quantum computing is really starting to become more of a thing, and quantum information and quantum metrology, is we just talk a little bit about what is quantum computing and why quantum computers are much more powerful, and the fact that this is stuff that's coming down the pike and that people should know about because people should be aware. We want to have contributions from the public. There needs to be public understanding if there's to be optimal application of quantum technologies for everyone, not just for a few people.
That all makes a lot of sense. So I have a lot of different questions for you. First is, I know that you have made LabEscape with collaborators. Who else is involved in the production of this game?
Oh, great question. One of the people who helped me a lot is a fellow physics professor here, Tim Stelzer, who does physics education research. He was originally a high-energy physicist, but now does physics education research. And he was very helpful, actually, just with, giving some funding to help us get off the ground and also helping us set up our original camera surveillance system. Like many escape rooms have, of course, you're monitored on camera. Nowadays, we actually don't do that. We've changed venues, and so we're in a configuration now where we just always have someone in the room with the people. And it's in a configuration where it makes sense for the person in the room to occasionally be giving suggestions or help or something like that. So he was definitely one person who's been very helpful. I had a lot of continued help in IT from Rebecca Wiltfong here, who's the IT person for the physics department at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And so she's done all the other logistics of setting up our webpage and all the scheduling and all kinds of payments, things like that. And then there's a huge list of students who have been working on this from the very beginning. The very first time we started, I had probably about 15 students who were working on different puzzles, trying to get them operational. So I mentioned we're on our fourth mission, so we've had new puzzles for each mission, and basically largely student put together. There have been a couple other volunteers that I've had, friends who are like retired electrical engineers, or metal workers or woodworkers, things like that, who've been helpful with providing some of the furniture or some of the electrical and electronics in a way. So the undergraduates and graduate students, they can all do electronics and they can do fancy things with microprocessors and all kinds of things like that. But what they're not good at is putting the whole thing in a box that has a fuse and that it has the connectors in ways that cannot be misconnected.
Yeah. Students are great at making prototypes. They're not great at making products.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, this is brilliant. You're going to student source puzzles for your next escape room, and it's all homework. It's just a request.
Right. Well, these are all volunteers that were working on the puzzles. And then the other people who have been helping throughout the whole thing is a bunch of student workers who help run the escape room. And those have been paid positions because, you're going to have to do the same thing 100 times over and over again.
You are Sisyphus running an escape room.
And you need to have people who show up on time and things like that. So yeah, it's been a lot of people who've been working with us, and I've been very grateful for that.
It's remarkable. You mentioned that you're on the 4th iteration of the game. How has it changed over the years?
Good question. Certainly the storyline has been evolving. So in the very first chapter, the poor professor has disappeared and people have to find out what happened to her. And in the sequel to that, the professor has been kidnapped and people have to try to rescue her. So there's that storyline. And then there's the prequel where we had to find out how she got her funding to begin with. And then in the latest version, which is the one that you did, the professor has to contend with having contracted not only the Zika virus, which he actually contracted right as the prequel was starting. And the reason that that's relevant is the Zika virus, one of the side effects is it causes memory loss. And that was the motivation for why there have to be clues for a lot of the passwords and things like that. Because otherwise, you have a brilliant professor, certainly one of the most brilliant professors on the planet. There's no reason why they would necessarily need to have a bunch of clues for remembering passwords. But instead, there's some motivation for why there needs to be these other things.
I love that.
And the other thing is that some of the medication that you take for that, Aricept is a medication that people take for memory loss. If any of the listeners know people who have Alzheimer's disease, sometimes they'll be put on Aricept because it helps in some way to deal with memory loss. Anyway, it turns out that one of the possible side effects of that is it makes you paranoid. And so it also makes you then want to not just leave clues around for remembering things, but you actually want them to be things that you're the only person who can figure out what they are. So there was another motivation in the storyline for actually having puzzles and actually having clues.
And why they're cryptic. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Things need to make a little bit of sense for me.
It sounds to me like the structure of the game has stayed roughly stable and you have adjusted the story and probably put in new technology and learnings along the way, folding in new ideas as you have created each chapter.
Yeah, that's more or less true. I mean, we started off, we used up the easy physical phenomena first, things that are easy to make puzzles of. And then I wanted to keep doing new, different sorts of things. And that gets harder and harder. Some of the more recent ones have had more technology. The ones that you did was 4.5. So there was a quantum entanglement source, actually, depending on where you did it, whether you were in Urbana, then we had a quantum entanglement source. And if we were in Los Angeles, then we didn't bring that along with us because it's hard to move. But anyway, that quantum entanglement source in the original chapter 4, you actually have to use it and you have to put in components. You have to put in transducers, which are things that you need in reality to get the thing to work. And it's fully functional. You can make measurements on it. If you're a scientist, there are extra challenges you have to do to actually make measurements on it. It completely can simulate doing quantum cryptography, one of the things that I do for a living. So in that sense, the technology has evolved and gotten more sophisticated.
Now, I have a question, though, which is that, is it the same players coming back and playing your escape room again and again? Is that why you felt the need to make new stories and introduce new properties? Good
question. Champaign-Urbana have a combined population of something like 140,000, which is not that big. And we've now had about 15,000 people, or maybe now 16,000 after our recent trips, who have gone through LabEscape. And let's say 12,000 of those local. So, it's of order 10% of the population. Now, we also have a huge university, and so there's a lot of students who keep rolling over and going through. But we also have a lot of people who would like to come back multiple times. There are events. Every year there's Engineering Open House. It's a university-sponsored event. And we get tens of thousands of people from around the state who come through. And people have done LabEscape, and they've said that it was like their favorite thing that they did. But they want to come back and do it again And therefore, we want to be able to offer different challenges for them so that they can do it again. So that's one reason. I have to say, although I don't really have time for it at all, because I'm a super, super overly subscribed physicist, I do really like the creative process. There's just something about coming up with new storylines and coming up with new puzzles and trying to see, can you actually get it to work in reality? We are now working, although I at one point swore that we would stop at 4 chapters. We are nearly done with the 5th chapter. If we had just like a solid week and a half to work on it, we would be finished with it. It's quite ambitious because it takes place 30 or 40 years in the future on a spaceship near the asteroid belt, and had to learn a bunch of asteroid physics and things like that so that everything is as real as it can be. Anyway, it is fun. I guess it's a little bit like directing a play, something like that maybe.
So you've built an amazing escape room, but are players finding you online? This is Jake from Weldwood Marketing. We help escape room owners rank higher on Google, drive bookings with Google ads and social media ads, and create websites that turn visitors into paying players. Stop losing customers to competitors. Let's escape the marketing maze together.
David, what is one of the holy grails for escape room business?
Weekday bookings.
And more specifically, booking corporate events.
I mean, in most cases, that's your weekday bookings. Bringing in big corporations in your area and having them run events in your company.
Yeah, and so this is one of the things that I know Weldwood Marketing specializes in, and this is something that they can help your business train for. They can even come in and help train your staff on how to do organic outreach to land those large corporate clients. And this was something that they do that I thought was so interesting. Jake told me that they also will train your staff on how to sell to different generations in work. So like selling to millennials is different from selling to boomers, and it's different from selling to Gen Z.
Hello, fellow youths.
Yeah, don't be that guy. Weldwood Marketing will help you to not be that guy. And they're also there for all of your support to help you land those big corporate events.
All right, REPOD listeners, we love the escape room and immersive industry so much. We're doing something we almost never do at Weldwood Marketing. We're offering discounts. 15% off marketing services for your first 3 months, and $750 off escape room websites. We wanted to make sure you have something special for being a fan of REPOD. Go to weldwoodmarketing.com/REPOD to schedule a discovery call with me, Jake, and let's take a full assessment of your online presence and find out ways that we can unlock some more money for you and your business.
Links and details in the show notes.
So you've run LabEscape for so many different groups over the years. Are there differences in the play patterns between, say, physicists at a conference versus students versus folks coming in from Champaign-Urbana versus avid escape room players?
First of all, the avid escape room players know good strategies of how to cooperate with each other and share information. And physicists are not always good at that. So I remember at one of the conferences, a colleague of mine came through with this whole group of students, and they split up tasks, and he said, I'll search the desk. And so he looked in the desk, and like he opened a drawer and he found something, and then he put it back in the drawer, and he didn't tell anyone. And he just said, oh, there's nothing of relevance in the desk. And we try not to have any red herrings at all. I try to have almost everything be relevant. And of course, he had put something significant away. And it was just so terrible because they were all his students. So none of them were going to go and question him and say, well, we should all go and search the desk again to make sure that you actually looked at everything.
Power dynamics are a funny thing.
It was absolutely, again, the worst person that you would want to have on the team.
Honestly, the worst person that you want to have on most teams is somebody who has power over the rest of the players, especially if they don't know how to use it in this environment. They do warp the play style of everybody around them, for better and for worse. Yes,
100% true. And power can mean a lot of different things. typically the worst thing that I see is when people come in and there's one person who's very confident and says, oh, I know exactly how this is going to be. It's going to be this, this, and this. I know that they're in trouble. They're going to be in trouble if everyone else believes that this is the person who knows everything, because I know that they don't know what it's going to be, because there's no way that they could, because we have a unique storyline and things are just different than people are used to seeing. And to the extent that one person commands a lot of attention, a lot of time people will think, well, okay, they know everything about this. And so we're just going to let them solve all these hard problems and we'll work on the other stuff. And it ends up being a disaster because you need to have collaboration.
Being loud does not mean that you are correct. It just means that you're loud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I will say that I typically am not a fan of public bookings. You know, this means you buy a ticket to an escape room, but other random people could buy a ticket to the same escape room. But in this case, I was actually grateful because I showed up. It was me and a couple people that were escape room enthusiasts, but then the other people that showed up to this were all part of this conference that the LabEscape was running at this conference. And so they had not played a bunch of escape rooms, but they knew a lot about the physics and about the optics. And so this was just the best of both worlds. We were marshaling everybody, getting them into this game flow, and they were able to understand a lot of the scientific principles that you have to apply and understand in order to solve some of these puzzles. So it worked out perfectly. That was one of the things that I loved. But the other thing I loved was that LabEscape only costs $6 per player, which is an absolutely incredible value. But I'm so curious, why only $6?
Okay, first of all, probably you were in California, so it should have been $5 for you.
Oh.
For me, it was 6 when I wrote the question.
For you, it was probably 8. If you did it in Champaign-Urbana, or 8 or 12 even.
Under $10, it's still a steal.
We're a nonprofit organization. As I like to say, we're also non-profitable. I guess as far as that goes. Our prices have changed. When we originally opened, we were in a local mall, Lincoln Square Mall, which turned out is the oldest, I believe, the oldest closed-in mall in the United States. But it's not really operating as a normal mall. And when we were running there, yeah, we thought pretty hard about the pricing. I think we were running there with, I think it was $15 for adults and $12 for students, or maybe 15 for students and 18 for adults, something like that. The goal was to be able to reach people. And so we didn't want to have people be excluded. And a lot of times if we would have like student groups go through, they might only pay $5 a person or something like that. At a conference, maybe the other question to ask is, why do you even charge anything? The reason we charge something is that the very first big physics conference we were at, which was in Boston, we didn't charge anything. And then we discovered it's a terrible idea not to charge anything, because we would have a group of, let's say, 8 people that were signed up. And it's made up of different groups. It's like one group of 2 and another group of 6 who happen to sign up. And it's time to go, and the group of 6 isn't there. And we reach out to them and they say, oh, we decided we're going to go for lunch instead, which completely screws the other 2 people. We're not really designed to work with just 2 people. It really needs to have a slightly larger number of people, I think, in order to be successful, which is one reason why we don't usually just do small private sorts of things, because it would just be, it would be too difficult for people. The other thing is, if you do that, I think probably most people will just say, yes, we only just want to have our group. We don't want to have another 1 person or another 2 people. And the problem with that is that then there's no way for those lone people or those couples to be able to do it. And I also didn't want to have that. Although I completely understand how terrible it can be if you're stuck with a horrible group of people in an escape room. I've only done like 50, so I don't even count as a novice.
Oh, no, you've done 50 is not novice at all.
It's a respectable number.
Okay.
This is why we can't have nice things, people. You have to ask for the players to invest a little bit of themselves in it, even if it's $5.
It turned out it makes a huge difference, even like at a comic book convention. If you don't charge anything, people, well, they're busy watching this other thing. They don't lose anything by not going. But if you charge even $5, it's like, oh, well, I paid money, so I'm going to go and do the thing. It just helps people to show up. Mm-hmm. I care less about the people not showing up for themselves. It's just that, again, it messes up the other people who were part of the team.
It messes up group dynamics, and it's also very demoralizing for the person who is running the game.
Right.
And I'll tell you this much too. Like I said, I came and played this with my group of very experienced escape room friends. We've ripped through all kinds of escape rooms. Even when people have said, this experience is designed for a larger group. And we're like, we got this. No problem. We can handle it. And let me tell you, we needed every minute of the time that we had in this room. We needed all of the manpower. We needed everybody's brain because it's so different. Yes, fundamentally, it feels like an escape room, but these are puzzles that we'd never experienced before. And it took a lot of experimentation. It took a lot of, do you remember what he taught us in the beginning session? And what principles do we need to apply at this moment? And so I definitely agree that it does require a large team to play.
So one anecdote, which is that when we ran this in Boston, we were keeping track of the times of all the groups. And actually the record time was not a group of physicists. It was a group of high school students, 5 high school students, and they happened to have 1 or 2 physicists with them. And that was like the secret sauce because the high school students have all the energy. If you just have a bunch of physicists, going back to your question of is there different kind of performance between the different groups, people get stuck in different ways. You may remember there was one puzzle where there's a screen with one dot on it. And depending on how you interact with the screen, that dot moves around. And I've certainly had groups of physicists who try to map out exactly where that dot is going and try to ascertain some puzzle out of that. And eventually I suggest maybe you just have someone else go look at the thing. And there's a very easy thing to do with that dot, which is, I would say, the obvious thing to do. It wasn't meant to be a trap to catch people for a long period of time, but you get people who are too caught up with little details, they can easily get stuck. I've also had people with the periodic table thinking, oh, if we put these chemicals together, only these ones will actually bind together in a particular way. It's like
expertise can be a curse.
I don't know any of that information. This is why we tell people, no, you don't want your cell phone. Your cell phone is going to be 1 billion red herrings that you just don't want.
So, as we said before, LabEscape begins every session with a little mini science class where you demonstrate some principles for us to learn. Now, was that always built into your design of the game, or did you originally just have players going into the escape room and then realize very quickly, oh, we need to teach people how these things work?
I think we've had it in really from the very beginning that we wanted to do some of that. And part of it was we wanted to put people at ease so that if people were worried about something being a science-based escape room, it's like, what am I going to have to do? I can't solve equations. It's like, I can't solve equations either. I'm terrible at it.
That's what the computer's for.
Yeah, for example, just being able to show people, you need a degree in physics to put the glasses on and you see something cool. That's all that we need. And the hope is that would help to allay fears that people might have about the fact that they're about to do something that's supposedly sciencey. The overall goal is to have people not be afraid of science because you don't need to be afraid of it. It's something that could be very helpful, and to see it as something that's enjoyable. Anyway, that's why we started doing things from the beginning where we have a pre-brief where we can show people actual demos and have them hopefully not be afraid of what's happening.
I really appreciated that because there's these polarized glasses that I've seen used in several different escape rooms, actually, where, there's a screen and you can't see what's on the monitor until you put on these special glasses and then you can read it. And so I've played with those in other escape rooms before, but I never really understood the science behind it. And so I did appreciate being taught how they actually work. Hey, escape room owners. Are you looking to level up your marketing and operations? BuzzShot is an all-in-one solution for powering business growth and improving the customer experience. They offer a ton of pre- and post-game features, including waiver management, creating awesome branded team photos, and they can streamline review management for Yelp, TripAdvisor, Google reviews, Facebook reviews, wherever people review. They got you covered, and they also offer integrations with Cogs. You don't have to take our word for it that BuzzShot is a great company. When I was at the very first Recon, David, and I think I've told this story before, but I literally was sitting in a conversation and I overheard one owner talking to another escape room owner, And the entire conversation was that owner trying to talk them into switching to buzzshot. Like this, this owner could not say enough good things about how much they loved it, how easy buzzshot made running their business. She was like an evangelist. And I remember that moment and I was like, you know what? I got to get Buzzshot on as a sponsor because I wanted to make sure we have sponsors that we believe in and that we know escape room owners truly believe in.
And I think just the fact that all of our ads for Buzzshot include testimonials from their happy customers helps to underscore how much their customers adore them. On that subject, Nick Moran of Phantom Peak has this to say about Buzzshot. We needed to work with the most reliable and robust platform available.
And this is a man that's hard to please.
That's true. Streamline your marketing and grow your escape room business. REPOD listeners get an extended free trial and 20% off your first 3 months with no setup fees or hidden charges. Visit buzzshot.com/REPOD, that's REPOD, to learn more. Link and details in the show notes. I want to shift a little bit and now start to talk about quantum computing and explore some of that a little bit because I have you here and I just want to explore this.
Okay, great. I'm ready.
So what is the most succinct way that you have found to explain the basic concept of quantum computing to someone with no background in science?
Classical computing is based on binary digits, or bits as we call them. And those are just things that can be 0 or 1. And if I had someone in front of me, I would take a coin out and I would show them heads on one side, tails on the other side. Heads could be a 0, tails could be a 1. Or in our electronics and our cell phones and such, that 0 could be some low voltage on some capacitor plate and 1 is some higher voltage on some capacitor plate. And then in the quantum case, we encode information on some quantum system. And that could be different types of quantum systems. And we can encode a 0 and we can encode a 1. But the thing is we can encode a 0 and a 1 at the same time. So we can have something be in a quantum superposition of 0 and 1 at the same time. And that gives you a lot of power in order to do computation. I guess I'm going to kind of diverge and give two separate things I want to say here. So one thing is that the way that you encode that information could be a lot of different things. It could be like in my own research, we use single photons or particles of light to encode information and to transmit information. And we might use the polarization to send that. And if we want to send a 0, we might send a horizontal polarization. And if we want to send a 1, we might send a vertical polarization. Easy enough. And now if you want to send this quantum superposition of something that's a 0 and a 1 at the same time, we send, for example, diagonal polarization. Diagonal polarization, to putting on IMAX glasses or putting on polarizing sunglasses and tilting your head by 45 degrees is not like some miraculous universe bending thing. It's really, in that sense, a very simple concept. So I want people not to think that quantum superposition is necessarily the thing that is ungraspable. I think sometimes it's overhyped a little bit and then people think they can't possibly grasp it.
I'd say the way that it was explained to me that kind of got through the first time was if you have a coin and you show the tails side, that's tails. If you show the head side, that's heads. And then if you flip it while it's in the air tumbling, what position is it in? Is it heads or tails? And the answer is it's both. Don't know. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I like the coin example, either flipping it or spinning it. And then, it's a quantum superposition of 0 and 1 at the same time. Okay, so that's how I would explain a quantum bit. If you have a classical bit, there's only one thing you can do to it. You could flip it. That's it. Or you could leave it alone. You could either leave it alone or you can flip it. In the quantum case, we can represent this arbitrary superposition of 0 and 1 as living on the surface of a sphere. It's got some longitude and some latitude, and that kind of describe whether it's a 0 at the bottom or 1 at the top, or arbitrary combinations of them everywhere on the surface. And in terms of the number of things that you can do to a sphere, well, there's an infinite number of them because you can rotate it about any axis by any angle. And so those are all the single qubit quantum gates that you can do. And there's an infinite number of them. So clearly things are going to be more complicated and have a richer set of opportunities than you would have just with a classical bit.
So my next question for you is, we have this traditional computing being bit-based, 1 and 0, and we have quantum computing being qubit-based, which has this kind of variable 1 or 0 or anywhere in between as its kind of foundation. What are the high-level implications of this? I think we all live in a world where the bit-based computers are driving almost everything that's happening around us. But what does this qubit-based computing change?
Yeah, so it enables you to solve some problems much faster than you could do with a classical computer. If you want to understand how quantum computers are more powerful than classical computers, if you took a classical computer like a laptop and you want to double the computational power, the way that you do that is you get another laptop, for example.
Yeah, currently when you scale computers, and scaling computers is a common thing that happens, Amazon will just spin up another server. A server is just another computer in a giant building filled with computers. So we just throw more power at it. It's just brute force.
You throw more, but by going from, let's say, 100 servers to 101, you've increased your computing power by 1%.
Yes.
In the quantum case, if you have a 1,000-qubit quantum computer, which no one does at the moment on the planet, but if you did, and you want to double its computational power, you don't make it 2,000 qubits, you make it 1,001. If you make it 1,002, it's 4 times more powerful. 1,003, it's 8 times more powerful. It turns out that you can simulate any computer on any other computer. So you can simulate a quantum computer with a classical computer, but simulating a 1,000-qubit quantum computer would take a classical computer that had 2 to the 1,000 classical bits. So that's 2 times itself 1,000 times. That's something like 10 to the 300, or 1 with 300 zeros written after it.
That's going to put us in the realm of more than the sum of the atoms in the universe.
Correct. More than all the electrons and the protons in the whole universe. You run out of them way before you get to that number. So you can't possibly simulate a quantum computer on a classical computer. So having said that, though, there aren't that many problems that quantum computers are proven to be good at. So one thing that they're known to be good at is they can factor large numbers into their prime constituents. Like factoring 15 is 3 times 5. And the reason you care about that is currently the fact that is not easy to do classically is what is behind whenever you have an HTTPS. The encryption that's used is based on the fact that someone published the product of 2 large prime numbers to you, and you don't know what the 2 prime numbers are, but you can use that big number to encrypt a message that even you can't uncrypt. Only the person who knows what the product of those 2 numbers are can encrypt it. And that's the basis of a lot of our current encryption. It turns out that a quantum computer, in fact, can decrypt that much more quickly than any classical computer could.
And that encryption method, this prime number, very large prime number, we're not using 2 and 7 here. We're using very large...
100 digits, let's say.
So we're using very large prime numbers to encrypt all of our data. And we as a society, as a civilization, have been doing this for about half a century now. What are the implications of quantum cryptography and the ability to factor these numbers so quickly on a society that has been using old bit-based encryption for half a century?
Great. So there's a couple answers to that. So one, there's a concern that now if someone comes up with a large-scale quantum computer, it needs to be pretty big to be able to crack things that you couldn't crack on a laptop, for example. So it needs to have, kind of making this up, but let's say 1 million qubits. So they're probably not too far off from that in order to crack something you couldn't do.
I'm going to take your word for it.
Just in case any listeners actually look up, I don't know what the precise answer is, but it's of order 1 million. And at the moment, the world has quantum computers that have maybe roughly 100 crappy, not really crappy, but not really good enough qubits. So we're still a ways away.
I'm going to pause you for a second. What makes them crappy?
Okay, what I mean by crappy is the fidelity of a gate might only be 99.9% instead of 99.999%.
Okay. So we are talking about degrees of precision.
We are, but the thing is, if the fidelity is only 99.9%, if you do 1,000 operations, you likely make an error.
Mm-hmm.
And to factor some large number, you might need to do 10 to the 9 operations, which means you need to have the error be less than 10 to the minus 9. Otherwise, you won't be able to do 10 to the 9 operations without having a fair chance of making an error. Okay, so coming back to the original question, there is certainly a concern that if you had a large-scale quantum computer, that lots of things that we would like to be secret will no longer be secret. And there is now a statement by the government that at least government offices are supposed to be using so-called post-quantum cryptography. This is classical cryptography that hopefully is not susceptible to that quantum attack. It's not based on products of prime numbers.
I'm hearing the word hopefully.
Okay, so NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, was in charge of surveying and evaluating a bunch of the different protocols, and they came up with their 4 top protocols, which are now been released for people to try to implement in their different processors and servers and things like that. And I can't remember what the date is. Maybe it's 2035, something like that. We could look that up to find out exactly when they're supposed to be rolled out by.
So all of these government agencies are supposed to roll out this new form of encryption that is hopefully going to be both traditional computer resistant and quantum computer resistant.
Correct. And the reason I say hopefully is, so these algorithms are known to be secure against the quantum computing algorithm that factors numbers is called Shor's algorithm. Peter Shor is the person who came up with it. So they are known to be secure against that algorithm. What's not known is if they're secure against any possible quantum algorithm. And it's not even clear if you can philosophically prove that they're secure against any possible quantum algorithm. And so you are kind of left in a situation, if I can oversimplify it, where you say, this is secure because we haven't figured out how to break it yet. And unfortunately, that is what was said about every single encryption system that was broken throughout history the night before it was broken, which is that we think this is secure because we haven't figured out how to break it yet. It's a little bit dicey.
Also, in a lot of encryption systems throughout history, it is something that had been said long after it had been broken, but before they realized that their encryption was broken.
Fair enough. Correct. It's possible maybe someone has even come up with a way to crack these prime numbers not using a quantum computer. So the other thing is that I don't want people to think that the only reason they should be interested in quantum computers is because their material could be hacked into. That by far is the least interesting application. Much more interesting is the fact that quantum computers are good at solving quantum mechanics problems. And I know you're thinking, I don't have any quantum mechanics problems. Why should I care about this?
We all got health problems.
Exactly. So how proteins fold up, for example, is a very complicated quantum mechanics problem, or how viruses behave, all of these very complicated molecules, or how to make a more efficient rocket fuel, or a more efficient fertilizer, or a material that won't corrode, for example. That's a huge one of industrial importance. Those material science problems, you cannot solve exactly on a classical computer. They're just way too complicated. And we could talk a little bit about why they're way too complicated if you're interested, but let's just say that they are. And it turns out that quantum computers, since they're quantum systems, can solve quantum mechanics problems. And so that is the intended application where there's going to hopefully be world-changing results that come out of it, where we have fertilizers that are 200% more efficient, or rocket fuel that's more efficient, or regular fuel that's more efficient, or some material for carbon capture that is much more efficient.
Yeah, there's an incredible amount of opportunity here. And one of the things I want to make sure is clear for those who are new to this concept, we are not going to have a point where Apple is releasing the iQuantum device that you have in your pocket. You're not going to have a personal quantum computer with an operating system from Microsoft. These are very large, weirdly aesthetically beautiful devices. They look like gold chandeliers, and they are kept freezing, like as close to 0 Kelvin as we can possibly get them. So this is not a computer that affects your life in that it is in your life. It is a computer that affects all sorts of different fields that then affect your life.
Everything you said is more or less true.
Tell me what I'm wrong.
The chandelier that you describe and the very low temperatures, that's relevant for some types of platforms for quantum computing. That's relevant, for example, for superconducting quantum processors. But there's other platforms that people use. I do things with light, with photons. And so there's a photonic-based platform. It doesn't need to be nearly that cold. It can work at, let's say, 2 or 4 degrees Kelvin instead. Still needs to be pretty cold.
That's pretty damn cold.
Yeah, but the other ones are maybe operating at like 20 millikelvin because the efficiency of refrigeration is related to the temperature. As the temperature goes to 0, the efficiency goes to 0, which means it's much harder to cool that last little piece.
I believe you, but for frame of reference, 4 Kelvin is minus 452 Fahrenheit and minus 269.15 Celsius. So we're still talking extraordinarily cold.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So that's certainly true. They are going to be very large scale of, you should think about like accelerator scale physics, big machines. I think that's true. However, it is possible that you will be able to, at some point, have access to one where you'll be able to send in a program to that computer and run it, or university researchers would be able to do that sort of thing. So that sort of quantum technology is likely potentially to be available to more people. Also, to the extent that we have quantum networks set up, those also might be usable by ordinary people. We have an outreach thing that's set up here in Urbana where we have an entanglement source in one of our laboratories, and the photons are directed to the local library, and then they come back, and people at the library can make measurements on those photons. They can do the same sort of tests that got the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. Those are the same things that you can use to do quantum cryptography. And so that actually might be directly accessible by the common man, so to speak.
That's incredibly cool.
What you should think about it is going to be, it's like the quantum computing is going to be on the cloud, and you may have access to that.
It's that time of the year, David.
You mean recon time?
Recon season! And this year we are doing recon from the comfort of your own home. That's right, folks. You can kick back. You don't have to wear pants. You can grab a glass of wine and enjoy recon from the comfort of your own living room.
Please put on pants, or at least don't let anyone see that you're not wearing pants. But yeah, it's really important to us that we give people from all around the world a chance to come to recon, that we have a low-cost event. It's free at the cheapest tier, and even the most expensive. This is about the recon team producing an event that is hyper accessible for everyone around the world to come join in. August 17th and 18th, 2025. There's no easier way to get access to so much information and so many wonderful people in the international escape room and immersive gaming movement. And you can learn more all about this at realityescapecon.com. Tickets are on sale now, and I hope to see you at Recon.
Come join us. Pants or no pants. What do you get when you cross puzzles, pals, and trivia? It's PG's Playhouse, our new show where we play games and explore interesting topics. If you love wordplay and learning about new things, check out PG's Playhouse, available now wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so just to shift topics a little bit, do you have a favorite representation of quantum physics in popular culture?
Yeah, like in law, there is My Cousin Vinny is the one movie that lawyers will look to and say, that one is actually accurate. I actually like that one. Is there a version of that for quantum physics? Is there something that represents it well, or in a way that you aren't embarrassed about the way that it is representing your field?
Certainly not Ant-Man.
Oh, Quantum Mania didn't nail it for you?
We actually put up a table outside the theater, and we had here's what quantum physics really is and what's going on with it, and why it's cool, but just different than what they're representing with that. I quite like the show Dark Matter, which explores some of these issues of quantum superpositions and parallel universes, that sort of thing.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we'll have to check it out.
Good to know.
The first time I ever learned about quantum mechanics was from Ender's Game. Have you read Ender's Game?
No, I saw the first movie, and then they never made another one, which was surprising.
That's how they describe the communications across galaxies and across planets. It's about quantum entanglement. And so that's how they explain these faster than light.
Right. And I hate that.
That was my only understanding of quantum entanglement is from Ender's Game.
Let me give you a better entanglement understanding.
Perfect. Let's do it.
So the first one, relevant to communication. Let's just say we have two coins, because you mentioned coins before. I'm going to flip my coin, you're going to flip your coin. And if they're not entangled, I'm going to get heads half the time, tails half the time, so are you. If they're not entangled, when I get heads, you could get heads or tails equally likely. So we're going to have four possibilities, both heads, both tails. I get heads, you get tails, or vice versa. But if they're entangled coins, Then when we do the flipping, somehow miraculously, I'm equally likely to get heads or tails, so are you, but whenever I get heads, you get heads. Whenever I get tails, you get tails. So there's this complete correlation, but it's still completely random. And that is a thing that you can't get classically. But I like this particular example because it explains why you cannot send information superluminally faster than light. Because although when I flip my coin, I immediately know from my result what your result will be, assuming you flip it the same way. There's different ways you could flip it. In polarization land, that's different ways that you could measure what the polarization is, just to give some reality to this. But I know when I make my measurement what result you'll get, but I can't control what result I get because I'm equally likely to get heads or tails, and therefore you're equally likely to get heads or tails. If I want to actually communicate something to you, I need to be able to send, for example, heads, 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 tails, heads, tails. That's going to mean I convert that into binary, and that's the letter B or something like that. But because I can't control what I'm going to get, I can't control what you're going to get. So there's no superluminal communication.
So we're not going to be developing faster than light quantum Morse code.
Correct. Okay, but now I want to give you my favorite way of explaining entanglement to people, which is that let's say you have this excited atom out in space. It decays, it emits a photon to conserve energy, and that photon goes off in all possible directions. It's in a quantum superposition of going in every possible direction because there's no reason it should go in any particular direction. Now, it turns out that light has momentum. Particles of light, photons, have momentum, and so you have to conserve momentum. So just like if you shoot a gun, the bullet goes one way and the gun recoils the other way. When the atom spits out its photon, the photon is going in one direction, the atom has to go in the opposite direction. So what that means in this case is the photon is going now in every possible direction and the atom is recoiling in every opposite direction. So that is a perfect example of an entangled state because the photon doesn't have a definite direction and the atom doesn't have a definite direction, but we know that they have to be completely opposite from each other. So that's an example of this kind of randomness and complete correlation at the same time. But let me explain why I like this example, which is that let's say you go out tonight and you look up toward that atom and say 100 years ago is when it emitted that photon. So that photon is now 200 light years across. It's this big ball, 200 light years across. And if you happen to be the person that sees it, it disappears everywhere else in the universe because if both of you saw it, that would violate energy conservation because the energy of the photon needs to go to the rhodopsin molecules in your eye in order for them to open up with this ion channel. So when you see the photon, it disappears everywhere else in the universe. And now the atom, which was recoiling in every opposite direction, now suddenly its location is as though it had been moving away from you for the last 100 years, because it has been, because that's the only way you would be able to conserve momentum. So the point is, when you go out tonight and you look at the dark sky and you're looking at the photons that came from these atoms across the universe, you are constantly popping all of these probability bubbles. You are experiencing entanglement all the time. You just don't know it because you don't have access to the atoms that are going the other way. But I'm not making this up. This is the reality of the universe. When you go out at night and you're looking up at the sky, you're constantly part of this whole entanglement experiment that's happening.
And so when my wife and I go outside at night and look up at a star, we look at the same star. Mm-hmm. We are both having our eyes struck by unique photons that the other one isn't actually seeing. We're seeing the same star, but it's because it's emitting photons. We're each getting unique photons from that.
In exactly the same way that if you go to a lake and you dip a cup of water in, both of you dip a cup of water in, you are both drinking water from the lake, but you're not drinking the same molecules of water. Exactly the same way. It's no more mysterious than that. It's a little bit more mysterious because right before the photon hits your eye, each photon is really at both of your eyes at the same time. It's just that then it hits one and it disappears by the other one, which is weird.
I feel like much less of a romantic than I was before all of this when, we're out gazing upon the same stars. No, you're not.
No, because instead you're becoming entangled to the rest of the universe.
Oh, okay. So my faith in romanticism is restored. I like that.
PG, I appreciate that you're looking to physics for romantics.
You got to put it into a realm of understanding and context for yourself. Paul, what comes next for you? When can we see LabEscape again?
Good question. Well, you can always come to Champaign-Urbana and come visit us. We'd love to have people come by.
They're right down the street from CU Adventures, and it's worth the quick little drive there.
And if you come to town, you should absolutely do CU Adventures because they are awesome. Definitely, they set a high standard for us. The goals are completely different, I guess I would say.
Very different experiences.
Yeah. We will occasionally continue to go to conferences here and there. And if there's a way that we should let the local community know, we would love to do that. We'd love to have local people come in, local students come in, not just people at the conference.
You can always email us at contact@roomescapeartist.com, and we will happily go and put that out on our social media and let people know where you're going to be.
Okay, awesome. That's great. We would also very much like to be at some point moving out of Champaign-Urbana up to other major city. In Champaign-Urbana, when we were at the mall, at one point we were up to 3 spaces, 3 rooms simultaneously, which was great because we could obviously handle larger groups there. At the moment, we can only handle 1 group at a time. I would very much like to be in a place like Chicago, for example, where we could have 4 or 5 rooms running simultaneously. And if any of your listeners are trying to figure out nice things to do with their money and want to help us out with that, as I say, we are a nonprofit, so we would certainly appreciate any help with that. I'm joking, but not really joking. And in particular, the possibility of working with other escape room places who might be interested in partnering with us. I do think that this is an opportunity to have something like this in many different places, because lots of places want to engage people with science and want to have people experience science in a way that is non-threatening to them. And that is a huge problem in the US, but around the whole world.
So let me ask you this. I know you said you're interested in moving into another permanent location within Illinois, but are you also interested in either licensing the game out or traveling around and doing more kind of temporary pop-up exhibitions?
Let me just tell you what my vision is, and who knows what will ever happen. But I envision that at some point there's a LabEscape in 5 or 10 cities around the country and 10 countries around the world or something like that. And we've had interest from people from Australia and Germany and other places in setting something like that up. That would be great. I do think it's important that it maintain its non-profitness in a way.
This is about access, not profit.
Exactly right. And it's like super important that we be able to do the pre-brief at the beginning and the debrief at the end, where we talk about here how this is relevant to you. And hey, there's all this quantum stuff coming on. And oh, if you want to learn more about that, here's a link where you can go and learn more about that. I think that's really important to our mission, is to be able to expose people to things in that way. And so I wouldn't want to just have the cool physics puzzles taken and just insert it into some other thing. It really is important to me that it be in trying to support this mission of letting people see that science is something that is a good thing for them, not a bad thing for them. Not that everyone who goes through is going to become a scientist. That isn't certainly the goal. I would be happy if people became interested in STEM and either decided to vote for people who support it or tell their kids that, yes, it's good. You should go and you should learn this because it might be interesting and could be relevant for the world. That would be great.
Okay, and so if any of our listeners are interested in continuing to follow you and your work, or if they're interested in pursuing having your game as an option wherever they are, how can they reach you or connect with you?
I think probably the best thing is labescape@illinois.edu. That comes directly to me, but then I'll know that it's related to LabEscape and not some sophomore wondering
if they can turn their work in late.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
I'll have all of that in the show notes for you.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us. I am a lover of science who was burned as a teenager by a really cruel science teacher, and it pushed me away from something that I had a lot of love for. I was someone who was able to come back around and re-embrace it, but seeing what LabEscape is doing really did remind me of what it was like to be a kid and to not really understand what was going on, but just be really excited by what was possible. And I think that was the magic of LabEscape. It was a pleasure to meet you and to have you answer so generously so many of my questions as I have been trying to wrap my head around the promise and possibility and risks and everything there is to be hopeful of in what quantum technology has to offer. And I really appreciate your knowledge, your insight, your time, and your generosity. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure has been all mine. It's been great to meet both of you. And actually, all the people who came through with the tour group is super awesome. Of course, it's fun to watch people who enjoy escape rooms doing escape rooms. There's some mirror neurons that are triggered by that. And I'm glad that you've got to experience the joy of science. In some sense, in a nutshell, I guess that's the end goal, is to show people that, and to show people that science is really a collaborative effort working with other people. It's not a lone effort. You need to have a diversity of perspectives. Otherwise, everyone will get stuck in the same place.
This episode of Reality Escape Pod is produced by Teresa Piazza with support by Lisa Spira and Teresa Wagner. We're edited by Steve Ewing of Stand Inside Media, music by Ryan Elder, logo by Janine Proct, and all of this is brought to you by RoomEscapeArtist.com, your home for well-researched, rational, and reasonably humorous escape room and immersive gaming content and events. Boy, am I aware that everyone out there is competing for your Patreon dollars these days. And I gotta tell you, we benefit so much from our Patreon community, from the financial support and the moral support that they provide. We have grown so much over the last few years. And by grow, I really mean we've built a lot of infrastructure to make all of Room Escape Artist work so much better. And that is only possible because of our Patreon community. That is the bedrock that everything we're doing is built upon. And we are so deeply thankful to every single person who has joined. And if you have the money and you're able to, we will be so appreciative if you can put your support behind us.
And if you're loving our content, we do have more. We have the bonus after show where we continue the conversation with our guests, and it is a whole lot of fun. And if you want recaps, walkthroughs of specific escape rooms, we've got the Spoilers Club. That is one of my favorite shows to record because I get to really dig deep into these escape rooms, talk about how they're made, and just generally gush about what I loved about these wonderful experiences. Check out patreon.com/roomescapeartist for more details on our additional shows.
And a very big thank you to our highest level Patreon backers: Derek Tam, Breakout Games, Escaparium, Pat Dupin from Olivier Escape, Panic Room, Chris Laughlin, Rex Miller, Mark from Keystone Escape Games, Byron Delmonico, Karen, Kieran from Mystery Unfolds, and Andy Mincer. We truly appreciate your ongoing support. And finally, as we come around to this story at the end of the episode, if you have gotten this far and you have not yet left a 5-star review for us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please go do so. It does so much to help signal to other people and to the algorithms that this show is worth listening to.
So we had a group once that was a composite group of a bunch of very self-confident Boy Scouts. I don't know, they were in their teens, and these 3 homeschooled Muslim girls. And they were all quiet as mice as things were going on. And the guys all came in and they just knew what everything was going to be. And I knew immediately that this was probably not going to go well for them. And indeed, that was the case. And one of the girls had said, maybe we should try looking under things, which turned out to be a good suggestion. But no one paid any attention, in part because no one could really hear her because the other guys were really loud and she was really quiet. And it was just interesting because, of course, nothing prevented her from going and looking under things. And I had to tell the 3 that the group had no hope at all of being successful if they weren't going to step up, because they were really the 3 who knew what was going on. And this is, I guess, my pitch for diversity. And it's not a particularly funny story, but definitely I've seen now time after time where the quiet voice is the one that really has the good idea. All voices should be listened to.